Hello everyone and welcome back to Fanboy Radio. Today I'm going to be doing a theory video regarding My Hero Academia, Chapter 259, The Evil Doctor's Quirk, Daruma. So I'm not going to do a review of this chapter and go over every detail because for the most part I thought this chapter was a setup chapter, but the more I looked into this doctor character, the more I found that was interesting, and then I started to piece together a bit of a theory. So I guess I'll just go ahead and give it to you guys up front. I think that the Doctor has a quirk, first of all, and I think that his quirk is to be extremely lucky. Now, to explain that, I feel like I have to go into my theory of how he grew up, how he met All for One, and what his ideologies are. So if you want to skip towards the end of this video where I explain exactly what I mean by his quirk being extremely lucky, but I'm going to go ahead and start off with what I feel like is an essential plot point that will describe this character. So to start, we should see how he's introduced into this chapter 259. We see his name and that he has no quirk, and that this little narration about what he has done in his life is the detective from the police force talking to the heroes about who this guy is. So this is knowledge that detective has gotten through as public record. It would say that he has no quirk, and he's only really hidden his quirk that he got from All for One from the public. But a good place to start with all this is just that he was born without a quirk. Just like Midoriya, or I'll just say Deku from now, was born without a quirk. Deku grew up very eccentric and very appreciative of hero society and heroes and their quirks because he was envious that he did not have a quirk of his own and that he could not be like them. In a similar way, I think that the Doctor was also very eccentric, just like Deku, because we see in chapters, if you want to go back to chapter 221 and chapter 222, the Doctor has a very, very eccentric personality. It doesn't show up almost at all in this chapter. He's like whistling and kind of thinking to himself. But in those chapters, it's very obvious that he's incredibly eccentric and he's pretty weird. So as a kid, growing up in hero society without a quirk and being eccentric the way he is about quirks, that puts him in a pretty similar spot that Midoriya was in. But I think that this guy has a very similar background to Shigaraki's, where it was tragic in some way. If he was an orphan, or if his parents abandoned him, or if he killed his family, or if he killed his best friend, whatever the case may be, and I have a stronger theory for that I'll mention in just a little bit, he had a tragic childhood, and he became someone who was at risk, or who was very impressionable, just like Shigaraki was. So when he was younger and he was very impressionable, he met All For One, someone who could take and give quirks, and that would allow him, if he worked with All For One, to be able to study quirks as much as he wanted to, and to be as eccentric as he could possibly be. And because of his tragic background, whatever the case may be, he would be very twisted in his ambitions. And the reason I think that he is twisted in his ambitions, and this is another reason why All For One decided to choose him like he chose Shigaraki, is that if you go back to chapter 222, you can see him have a very interesting and compelling line where he says, "Villains are those who bring pipe dreams to life." Another translation of this that I've seen is that in that sentence, when he was talking to Shigaraki in chapter 222, he's saying, "Prove to me that you can make your villainous pipe dreams a reality." In both cases, I think that the doctor, Daruma, is referring to his own life and his own history of having a very twisted background and having a very twisted ambition, but going after it anyway and believing that he can make it anyway. Now, to that end, he was very comfortable with the fact that he was going to be doing villainous work with All For One and working very closely to All For One. And when we see his public record and his professional record and what he's accomplished so far, he's founded the Jaku General Hospital, he's built orphanages, nursery homes, and partnered with several private clinics. Now, on the point of Jaku General Hospital, if you guys have seen the newest Star Wars films, the last 3, the main character Rey grew up on the planet of Jaku, which is what Jaku Hospital is referring to, because the mangaka really likes Star Wars references with Kamino and Tatooine Station, I believe it was, at the very beginning of the show. In any case, Jaku General Hospital might be alluding to the fact that the doctor, part of what could be his tragic background, is that he was abandoned by his parents because he was quirkless, or maybe they didn't know he was quirkless, but he was abandoned either way, just like Rey was abandoned on Jaku. But in any case, we get to the point where he's an adult and he's working with All For One and he's experimenting with all of these quirks. I believe that the doctor is kind of like an Orochimaru figure. If you've watched Naruto, Orochimaru takes advantage of talented kids who have been left behind by their families or their clans or whatever, and then he uses them for their own purposes. In the same way, I think that Daruma, the doctor, has built these orphanages, nursery homes, so forth and so forth, to take advantage of at-risk populations, so that if he sees someone with an interesting quirk, he can kill that person or kidnap that person or experiment on that person without people being suspicious of him. And for instance, his laboratory, the entrance to his laboratory in Jaku Hospital is through a door through the morgue, right? So let's say the doctor is working his daily routine. He sees someone that comes in sick with an incredible quirk, and he manufactures their death and tells their loved ones, oh, they died of health complications, he cannot be saved. He takes them to the morgue and tells, the nurses and the rest of the hospital staff that that's where the body is going to be stored. But really, he's taking the body down to his secret laboratory, where he's going to experiment on that person and possibly transfer that person's quirk into a nomu or make that person's body into a nomu itself. And no one would be suspicious of this, because who's gonna go check up on the bodies in a morgue, right? Like, once someone's dead, no one's gonna be like looking for that body, right? In the same way, he could have also, with these orphanages, taken advantage of orphans who thought that they may have been outcasted, or who had pretty incredible quirks but didn't think that they didn't have the guidance of a parent, right, to lead them to how to use that quirk. Just like if Eddie or Bakugo were orphans, their quirk would be something that would be very isolating to them if they didn't have anyone to show them how to use it the proper way. Now, here's where the story gets a little dark. In chapter 221, we see when the League of Villains enters the doctor's laboratory that there's all these water tanks with nomu bodies inside of them. And the doctor says that these nomus that he's working on now are far more powerful than any other nomus that he's, made thus far. Now, when we see that picture, there are 6 tubes on either side of this narrow walkway, which means there are at the least 12 nomus that this doctor has been working on that are incredibly powerful. Which makes sense why they sent, the mangaka has set up the story where Endeavor, Miruku, Aizawa, and President Mike are all inside the hospital to capture this doctor. But in reality, if you didn't know much about the doctor, would you really need the number 1 hero and 20 decent backup heroes to take him? I'm pretty sure that these guys are going to fight at least some of these nomus in the laboratory, and that the doctor's going to get away. Another note on the nomus is that in this chapter we see a tiny nomu with kind of nose ears, which is really weird. And he's also just a head on 2 very skinny legs and 2 shoes. If you go back to chapter 222, there is another small nomu very similar to this one. I don't think it's the same one because it doesn't have ears and it has different shoes on. But that nomu's name is John or Johnny, I believe. And that is the nomu that can use the liquid warping quirk that where that black liquid comes out of a person's mouth and warps that person to or from the location of that nomu. In the same way, I think that this other small nomu that we see in chapter 259 is also a kind of 1 quirk use nomu, where it's the doctor utilizes these smaller nomu to use them as kind of devices for 1 quirk. And I think that because we've seen bigger nomu who are really strong and muscular, and because the doctor has built these orphanages to possibly take advantage of at-risk kids, that these smaller nomu that he has around the laboratory could possibly be kids who he saw that they were impressionable or no one was looking after them, and he used them to study their quirk and to experiment on their body and use them in this sinister way where he's controlling them as little nomus walking around his laboratory. And that's really messed up if those are kids. It's terrible. It's this guy is Orochimaru 2.0 if that's the case. But that leads us to what his quirk is, right? And again, I believe that his quirk is to be extremely lucky, and I'll tell you why. And in most stories, or in a decent amount of stories, the writer of that story will give a character a name that has a deeper meaning. For the doctor, his real name is Daruma Uchiko. And I looked up the etymology for these 2 words in Japanese, and a Daruma is actually a doll, a Daruma doll, that's sold in Japan. And what you do is you buy these dolls and gift them to people as presents to bring them good luck. And the tradition that you use these Daruma dolls for is that whoever owns the doll will receive it with 2 blank white eyes. Once you have a goal that you want to work to and you've set your mind on that goal, you color in the left eye of the Daruma doll, and then leave the right eye blank as a blank white spot. And so when you finally complete that goal, you color in the right eye of the doll to symbolize that you've finally completed it. Now, these dolls are meant to represent ambition and luck in trying to complete that ambition. Now, Daruma, if you look closely at the way he's drawn in a lot of panels in the manga, he has these two big, he has these goggles on that makes his eyes like these two big dots. In a lot of panels, when they show his eyes, there's only one eye visible at a time. So sometimes it's his left eye drawn in, and sometimes it's his right eye drawn in, but at no times are both eyes drawn in. And when only one eye is drawn in, the other one appears as a giant blank white spot, very similar to old doctor, round doctor, right? Come face to face with the number one hero, Endeavor. And you're thinking immediately that, oh, okay, this guy's going to get captured or killed right off the bat. But because he's so crucial to the operation, it would make a lot of sense for him to have the quirk of extreme luck so that he can avoid any type of harm in these incredible situations that he finds himself in. Like this, he's about to face 20 villains. The odds are so stacked against him that there should be no way that he gets out of this. But if his quirk is extreme luck, just like his name would suggest, worshipper of luck, and that he is essentially a Daruma, like a Daruma doll, he could use that luck for his ambition to escape any situation and to keep living his life as he wants to as a villain. But yeah, that's it for me, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you like this type of content, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll post videos like this irregularly, or when I come up with some kind of theory like this. If you want to comment anything about your ideas of what his quirk possibly could be, or what his background could be, or if you have any questions for me, feel free to comment and I will reply absolutely. But yeah, thank you for listening this far in, and I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.